Hello and welcome to iGCSE Success. If you're new here, a big hello to you. I'm an English teacher and I post content here on YouTube to prepare students for their Cambridge First Language English exam. And if that's what you're looking for, be sure to check out the videos on my channel because I break down a number of the core skills needed to succeed with First Language English. 2020, what a difficult year it has been for many reasons. And of course, it was the year that saw Cambridge revamp the entire syllabus. One of those changes being the coursework. In previous years, students could decide between writing either a narrative or a piece of descriptive writing. This year, you have to do both. Why, you ask? Well, let's get on with today's video. Undoubtedly, it boils down to Cambridge wanting candidates to be acutely aware of the differences between the two styles of writing. Whilst there certainly is some overlap, i.e. you would expect to find some evocative descriptions in narrative pieces, both styles of writing are quite different, and different in the sense of what their main focus is throughout. Remember, narratives are often far more complex. They have a plot, they have lots of action, and they might feature things such as characterization and dialogue, and they may well be set over a longer period of time. Descriptive writing, on the other hand, focuses predominantly on sensory imagery. So in other words, the things we experience with our senses, and this allows us to become fully immersed in the images you are creating. So now let's take a look at a paragraph from a descriptive piece of coursework and compare that with a paragraph from a narrative piece of coursework. Hi guys, so what you're looking at now is a piece of descriptive coursework assignment 2 from the Coursework handbook. If you do ask your teachers, I'm sure they'll be happy to show you this, but it is a really useful document. For the purpose of this video and to, I guess, differentiate a piece of description from narrative, I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs and then we'll move on to looking at a piece of narrative coursework. So it starts with, slowly into the vast blue ocean, the snow-white boat drifts on and on. From all directions, stillness emanates. An endless blue, so deep that you could fall for an eternity. The sudden sound of the engine excites the water, producing a bubbly froth. Lovely, lovely imagery there. Reaching down dreamily, some lovely sentence structures. I scoop up the foam before blowing it towards the heavens, as if nature had drawn me a magnificent bubble bath. Froth trailed leisurely behind me as I cut the motor, drawing the boat to a stop. I decided to drift on the tide. So no time wasted here, guys. The candidate writes so well and describes this scene of the vast blue ocean with really, really evocative imagery, and it's done so well. Let's read the second paragraph. From here, a dark but faint line begins to emerge on the horizon. With the hypnotic, ceaseless rocking and bobbing of the boat, the line grows into a spectral vision of walls, roofs, and spires. Off to the right, the needle-sharp steeple of an ancient church weaves itself into the sky's tapestry of clouds. Lovely image there. A slow sequence of dings begins to ring out from the church bell, each ring resonating differently, like voices in a church choir. A simple but sonorous sound. So what makes this a piece of description and not a narrative? Yes, the candidate has decided to use that I voice, and that is perfectly okay. But what you need to notice is that the main focus is describing a number of different images using sensory imagery and using it very, very effectively. And notice as well, it's not just visual imagery, there's auditory imagery as well. We've got the church bell ringing, which is described as being a simple but sonorous sound. Just absolutely beautiful. Now let's take a look at a short paragraph from a piece of narrative coursework. Ouch! The words in front of me blurred a little and wiped a stray tear from my cheek. I took in a deep breath, but it came out shaky. Glancing down, I saw my tea had splattered over the rim of the cup in the saucer. I needed air. Struggling to regain composure, I walked towards the door. Oi! Your cheque, the waitress barked. Sorry, I mumbled, throwing down $100 note. Without waiting for change, I stumbled out into the night. Everything felt like it was imploding. My heart pounded incessantly. It felt like the ultimate failure. I'd spent my life working up to this point, and now it was worthless. Rage and frustration boiled through me. I sunk to my knees, tears splattered from my eyes. The wood stung beneath me, but I didn't care. Years of desperately trying to become something fell onto my shoulders. Self-doubt swung at me like a hammer. Okay, I don't really need to read the rest, but again, written really, really well. But what you need to notice is that the focus is very, very different. And the focus for this particular candidate is characterization. So, of course, whilst there is imagery, the candidate is very much using that imagery to create this really interesting and compelling character and to show the reader the dire situation this particular character is in. And of course, you also have dialogue to help build the character. And of course, you wouldn't be expected to use dialogue within a piece of description. Now it's time to move swiftly onto my 5 top tips. And just like my narrative video, which I will link up here, these will consist of some do's and perhaps some major don'ts. My first tip, of course, is to use the show, don't tell technique. And I'm sure your teacher has drilled this phrase into you plenty of times, but in case you've not heard of it before, let's go through it. Now, the show, don't tell technique essentially means that you create a really vivid picture for the reader and you show them what is happening rather than stating in an explicit way. And of course, this can be achieved through imagery and powerful vocabulary choices. Let's take the following example. The student was stressed. Now, of course, with this sentence, we are simply telling the reader that the student is feeling a particular emotion. And these kind of telling sentences, they fail to create a vivid image for the reader. So a more effective sentence would be one that shows the reader why this student is feeling stressed. So you could say, for example, the student rocked back and forth on their chair as they scanned the scattered revision cards. And of course, the fact that this student is rocking back and forth on their chair and they are looking at all of these revision cards, which are haphazardly everywhere, it implies that they are feeling stressed or anxious. And as a result, it creates a far more powerful image than simply explicitly stating something. Now, my second tip is that you want to try and focus on a variety of different images. Once you've decided on the images that you are going to explore, you then want to use what I call the zoom in technique. If, say, for example, you are writing about a day at a theme park, the first thing you might want to focus on is a big roller coaster. What I mean by zoom in is that you focus on one particular thing. So you could zoom into the fear that is being felt by those riding the roller coaster. You could describe their facial expressions, their screams, the motion of the coaster itself. You could perhaps then zoom in on a calmer ride which has a number of younger children gleefully smiling away. Perhaps your last image could be getting back into the car and describing the landscape of the theme park from afar. You really want to try and have images that almost contrast with one another. You don't want a descriptive piece of coursework which is just 100 miles per hour. This leads me nicely onto my third point or my third tip, and that is to include movement, and be that time or place. The best pieces of descriptive coursework I mark every single year, they are not static. They do not simply focus on one still image. And if you do approach the coursework simply just describing one still image, chances are it's going to lose that excitement and you're not going to be able to fill the word count, that's for sure. Number 4 is, of course, to use imagery, and to use imagery well. Similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, all of that good stuff are brilliant for creating vivid images in the reader's head. Just strike the right balance and avoid any kind of cliche imagery. You know, the stars were shining diamonds and all of that stuff. Now, tip number 5 is really quite important, and that is to not go overboard with your language choices. Quite often students seem quite hardwired to open up a thesaurus and pick out all of these fancy adjectives which they've never heard of before, they can't pronounce, they just scatter them throughout in this really haphazard way. And it's a difficult one really, because Cambridge do expect you, certainly if you are aiming for the top marks, to be able to use vocabulary precisely and to be able to show that you can use ambitious vocabulary for effect. But when language is too colourful or too ambitious, or there's just too much of it, it just destroys that realism. And I guess it's just again striking that right balance and just being able to show Cambridge, hey, I can use some ambitious vocabulary choices and I can use them for effect. Now for the last part of this video, I'm going to be reading through a piece of coursework one of my students submitted to Cambridge, and I think this got about 23 out of 25. Now for the last part of this video, let's take a read of a piece of descriptive writing coursework that was actually submitted to Cambridge. I think we agreed on a mark of 23 out of 25 for this particular piece. It's titled A Destruction of Greed, and it's based on the events of the tsunami in 2004. I'm going to read the whole thing and then I will give you a summative comment at the end. As I draw the curtains, sunlight beams through the translucent valance as it usually does most mornings during this time of year. Sliding the glass door open, I gaze into the familiar view that I've habitually taken for granted, thinking that it would always remain the blissful state it is in this moment in time. The tranquil noise of crashing waves and the briny smell of the ocean fills the air. Fine golden grains gleam as a glint of sunlight gently lands over it. There's never any other time of day like this, before the mass crowds of travellers desperate for a summer glow and the tireless children populate the area. I guess it is only fair if everyone got to experience paradise on this alluring island. According to routine, the day continuously progresses, but something in today's air stirs the feeling of uneasiness. As I peer out of the tinted glass over the masses of red burning skin, I begin to notice the peculiar way the tide backs away from the coastline. It's probably just the tide shifting back to the other side of the coast. Without warning, waves slam the fine grains of dust, drowning its shimmer. The collisions grow rapidly, becoming increasingly frequent. What appeared beyond the glass pane brings my body to an unbidden standstill. The beast vigorously grows, creating an unnatural hunger. Seconds tick by and precious minutes pass. It has grown to the sheer height of a palm tree, allowing shift towards its prey. Inconceivably, the gears in my body click into place in a forceful motion, and before I can comprehend, my legs alternate to extend down the road to survival. After what feels like an eternal pain of racing against time, a congestion of vehicles forces my frame to a sudden halt. Clouds have hidden the rays of light. High-pitched beeping fills the air with panic. Desperate screams for loved ones generated in the chaos travel against the direction. Frantic masses scamper to seek higher ground. It's hard to take in that my body is now surrendered by terror alongside many others, furiously chased by a prey's undying greed. I focus my mind to alternatively place my soles in a light motion ahead of each other as I reach the foot of the stairwell, hopeful to promptly ascend to safety. Flickering lights blocked by dense figures create an obstruction. It's almost pitch black. Flashes of lighting send shrieks of terror. A sudden pressure on my back abruptly jolts me backwards. My body instantly tumbles off the persistent path. For a moment my conscience remains dormant. My first shock strikes my dominant knee to click back. The second followed, violently bending my left ankle inwards. Eventually, my current distorted frame slams the cold cement landing. The brute force scrapes a sparse layer of skin beneath the forearm and knees as they absorb the impact. A chill shoots up my spine, creating a brief numbness, which quickly... I'm going to take a guess that this was the student's first draft. There are a few mechanical errors in terms of sentence construction. Anyway, let's continue. Figures mindlessly travel past to seek protection from the beast-like prey. One by one, they hastily step over a hindrance, obscuring the already narrow stairwell while attempting to avoid the ghastly sight of it. Several heavy shoes collide with my fragile frame. Fresh wounds covering my knees and forearms drip blood, which gathers into a dark crimson puddle on the light grey slab. The butchered sight and metallic smell lures my mind to feel the excruciating pain. Perhaps I should just accept fate and allow it to run its course. I might as well admit defeat and spend my remaining moments reminiscing the fantasy I was blessed with. With a heavy struggle, I managed to maneuver my crippling frame towards my side, allowing the wall to support my weight so that others will not suffer a similar fate. I force my eyes shut in the hope the pain will fade. Nothing else matters, and I can only be contented as my suffering will shortly come to an end. The sound of crushing inches closer and will soon save my soul from the fright and terror. Why is it so bright? Rays of light strike eyelids. Warmth skims the top layer of my skin. I squint, my eyes struggling to break the seal to return to reality. Forcing a blink to clear my blurry sight, unfamiliar shadows make up the surroundings. Gradual flashes of yesterday return to my memory. How did I possibly get here? There are rows of neighbouring bodies. Some shift through several remains completely still on the ground. Those who are fortunate enough check up on loved ones as others mourn their losses. I anxiously peer at my wounds, confirming the harsh reality is not merely a thrilling nightmare. My left foot appears to be wrapped in a white bandage, and knees and forearms taped with a couple layers of gauzes. Still bearing the question of how I ended up here, I make a trying attempt to get on my feet. Astoundedly, I manage to support my bruised figure on my right foot. I cautiously trudge towards the ledge that appears ahead of me, cautious not to stumble over individuals who are already in anguish. The sight of what used to be a crowded street stunned me. The tides had seized and destructed everything in its path. What did this faultless island ever do to deserve such harm? Debris scattered the streets, vehicles were squashed, replicating those in a junkyard. Buildings lay horizontally on their side with fragments scattered around it as trees form barriers on the road. The sight beyond is unforeseen in the tranquility of the previous dawn. As I stood there mourning the destruction that spreads beyond my sight, a fresh breeze gently pushes the strands of my hair back, transmitting me back to the beach house I've called home for over a year now. Oh, how I would kill to relive the memories that house so graciously given me. That house has so graciously given me. So whilst arguably at times it does seem to slip into a kind of narrative style, the focus for each paragraph is to create a different, evocative and powerful image. Notice as well how it's not a static description. Okay, it's not a still shot. There's a sense of movement, there's a sense of pace, there's a sense of time passing. And all of the senses have been used really, really effectively. And it really immerses us into the images the student has described. Of course, as well, there are some excellent vocabulary choices. Not all of them are appropriate. There are some good sentence structures as well. There are some mechanical errors. I'm aware of that. I'm pretty sure this was the first draft. But in terms of it being a successful piece of description writing, that is realistic. Absolutely. That's all from me today, guys. My next video, I will be breaking down some of the questions from the May-June 2020 series. Yes, Cambridge has finally released them, so stay tuned if that sounds interesting to you. So until next time, bye-bye.